Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
Bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief, and I am your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield's Morning Coffee with the Chief. We can also find us on Rumble. We come on at Tuesday mornings at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Tuesday, and I do other appearances, and so I did a recent appearance on TNT Radio, where I did some commentary on the recent arrest of George Gascon's number 3, the person in charge of ethics and integrity. Believe it or not, she was indicted for 11 felony counts because she was not so ethical and she lacked integrity. And so I made some comments, and they just sent me the link this morning, so I posted it on my Twitter at LASD Jordan, so you can listen to my comments regarding George Gascon, the sorrow-funded DA's number 3 in his office, who is in charge of integrity and ethics, who has no integrity and ethics, and that's Diana Tran. Additionally, tomorrow's show for Briefing with the Chief, so I do another show where we do public policy, politics, and the news. And I've been wanting to get an expert on who can talk about, or somebody who can talk intelligently about anti-Semitism on college campuses. So I have an editorial writer for the Daily News coming on my radio show tomorrow, Briefing with the Chief, and we're going to talk about anti-Semitism on the college campuses. I will get into a subject called the Heterodox Academy. If we want to turn it around our colleges, there is an organization that is working very hard at doing that, called the Heterodox Academy. I'll get into a little bit of that, but my Briefing with the Chief is on kjradb.com. It's at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch it on Rumble or their KJRA's Facebook feed or their Twitter feed. But you can also go to kjradb.com, go to Briefing with the Chief, and go to and find all the versions of my show, the audio versions of my show at the bottom of the page. You can go to WW Speaker and find it there as well. WW Speaker, briefingwiththechief.com, and then the audio versions. And you can actually pull up your Amazon account and Google Briefing with the Chief, and you'll find audio versions of my podcast there as well. And it's all free. All the audio versions of my show are free. So I'm really looking forward to the show tomorrow, where we're going to address anti-Semitism. In 2 weeks, on that show, I'll also be interviewing Nathan Hochman, who's running against George Gascon. I can't wait to do that. I'm getting ready. We're going to go over his public policy issues because they're going to cast him as a right-winger, and I'm going to point out issues where he's really a moderate and he wants to address change in public policy for the better, because Gascon's change in public policy has only hurt us. Now, before I get into my show, I did have on my show a couple weeks ago, Briefing with the Chief, Troy Vaughn from the Los Angeles Mission. And if you've been listening to my show, I always plug the Los Angeles Mission, and Troy was on. He talked about all the great work they're doing. I would encourage you to go back and listen to that broadcast. But the LosAngelesMission.org, LosAngelesMission.org, they do a wonderful job for the homeless down on Skid Row. They feed over, I want to say he was talking about 1 million meals a year that they not only feed to the people on Skid Row, but they project outward to families that are struggling, including families that have kids in foster care. They do the best that they can to meet the needs of not only the people on Skid Row, but they've extended their reach since COVID to provide more services. And we talked about it. He believes we need to have more shelter beds. We need to have competent treatment for those folks to get them off a skid row and back into be productive members of society. But they need help to do that. They get some money from government, but most of the money comes from private concerns. So go to the LosAngelesMission.org and make a donation of $25, $50, $100. Do your good deed for today by checking out the Los Angeles Mission. So on today's show, I got two great guests. Both have been on my show in the past, and we're going to review the movie Mystic River. And I'll go by rank. That's what I'll do. So the first guy, he's been on a couple of times, and that is retired Sergeant Scott Orr. And Scott is a California refugee. He is in Tennessee, but he's traveling right now. Looks like he's in a hotel, but Scott and I worked together at Transit and Carson Station, a couple different places. And he has an expertise in investigations because I think he worked OSS for a while, right? And
10 years.
And gangs. And this is a little different. This is not really about gangs, but it is about relationships and over lifetime and problems that happen, abusive relationships and families, and just the negative outcome, pedophiles, all kinds of great stuff. Great stuff. You're happy to be here, right? So, and so my next guest is going to be retired detective Danny Regalado, and Danny and I worked together. You're a little dark now, Danny. I don't know if you changed your lighting, but we worked together at Transit Services Bureau, where I was ultimately the chief. Danny was one of my investigators, and we did a lot of really good work there. We did some award-winning work there. I was really proud of our investigative units there because when I got there, it was a little bit of a mess, only because it was poorly led. And then we got some good people in there, Louis Nunez, I remember, and we cleaned up the Detective Bureau, and we really started doing some good work. Unappreciated, I think, by the transit system, but it was still good work. It was appreciated by the passengers. And, a lot of people were proud of the work they were doing at transit. So, Danny, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So my understanding is you're soon to join Sergeant Orr to be a California refugee as well, right?
That's the plan. That's the master plan here in October, yeah.
Now, if you guys see the name here, you recognize that Danny is comments every now and then on the show. So he is a listener to the show fairly regularly, I guess. And so we thought, well, he's been on the show once before. We did a Wamba movie, as I remember. I can't remember which movie we did together.
I think we did The Choir Boys.
The Choir Boys, okay. And he's a fan of Wamba, but Wamba stuff, not all of it got made into a movie. Some of it was made for TV movies, which I haven't really done a lot of that. And then a lot of it was crime series and dramas, which I haven't really done yet. But I love his stuff. It's good stuff. And I wanted to do the blooding with you, but I don't think they made that into a movie. I'll have to look to see if they got
No, the blooding I don't think was made into a movie.
I might have to look for a documentary. Maybe we can talk about it there, because I think that is, for you guys who don't know, there's Joseph Wamba does both fiction and nonfiction. That is a story about a nonfiction event in London or England, in which two girls were murdered, and they were by a serial killer basically, and they were trying to find out who it was. And it was the first time that they actually used DNA taken from blood to actually solve the murder. And they were asking everybody in the village to submit to a DNA test. And they talked about a little bit about the science, a lot about how they implemented that strategy. And actually, Colin Pitchfork, I think, is the name of the murderer. Colin Pitchfork, and believe it or not, that's his name, Pitchfork. He tried to avoid that DNA test, and they figured it out, and then figured out who he is. And just recently, the Home Secretary was talking about whether they're going to let this guy out or not, because he's still a young guy, so he can still be a predator. But it's a good book if you've not heard of that story. But today we're going to do the movie Mystic River. It was released in 2003. It's an American neo-noir crime drama, directed and co-produced by Clint Eastwood. So there's a fan. I like Clint Eastwood. When I was up in Monterey going to some classes up there, one of the other students, I think she was a captain in the Coast Guard, said, "Let's go to Clint's restaurant." And sure enough, he was there having toast and tea at the bar. And the ladies were all excited because it was a mixed class. And I didn't bother him because he looked like he didn't want to be bothered, but they were trying to bother him. But so Clint Eastwood directed and stars Sean Penn, Tim Robbins, Kevin Bacon, and I like Kevin Bacon, even though he's saying some crazy lefty stuff lately. I still like him. I'm never much of a fan of Sean Penn and Tim Robbins. Lawrence Fishburne's in this one. I always like him. He does a pretty good job. But there's a gal in the show, and she plays the daughter of Sean Penn in this movie, Emmy
Rossum.
She was in, I think it was the Showtime series Shameless. Have you guys watched that?
Yeah.
She's a fantastic actress in there. I mean, talk about really good. I really liked her in that.
Great series. She also starred in Phantom of the Opera.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
The version.
Okay, was that the one with Liam Neeson? No,
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was in that, and I had forgotten that she was in this until I started rewatching it, and I was going, "Oh my god, I forgot she was in this movie." But yeah, she's a good actress.
Yeah, no, I loved her in Shameless. She was fantastic, and she was good in this one, although it was a kind of a shorter part, though, right? But you know what? We have this old time. He played just a character in this one, but Eli Wallach.
You know, him and Clint Eastwood are very good friends since The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, so he was Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He played Tuco in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and he was all right. The first Magnificent Seven, starring Yul Brynner, right? He was the bad guy. He made the Mexican gang leader, or whatever, in that one, right? And so, and that was a great movie because Steve McQueen was in it. Robert Vaughn was in it. I'm trying to remember all the people that were in that movie, but I know Charles Bronson was in that movie, right?
Yeah.
So he played the bad guy in that one, and and it was surprising because it said he was uncredited in this movie, but So it was good to see him, and I do have a little scene that we'll talk about with him and get into him. So what'd you think of the movie, Scott?
Oh, I enjoyed it when it first came out. We didn't see it in the theaters, so I'm not a big theater guy, so we didn't see it in the theater. But it's been years since I watched it, and it was nice to watch it again. We watched it last night sitting in the hotel, and Emmy Ross, and my wife's like, "Oh, that's Emmy Ross." I'm like, "Who's that?" She's like, "Did you ever watch the series Shameless?" And I'm like, "No, I don't watch a lot of TV. I don't know who that is." So she goes, "Oh, she's been in this," and she starts naming all this stuff off, and I'm like, "Great."
I'll have to have your wife on. I'll have to do the LSD Wives show, right?
But no, that's a great movie. I mean, like I said earlier, if you get past some of the actors and what they do, and if you look at the cast, it's just a phenomenal. I think every one of them has won an Academy Award at one time or another.
Yeah. And two of them were nominated. Tim Robbins was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and Sean Penn was nominated for Best Actor. They didn't win it, but they were nominated, and that's a big deal, I guess, in Hollywood. So their politics are bad, but their star power and their craft is good. What do you think, Danny?
I hadn't seen the movie in a while, so I had to again go refresh myself and watch it. That's when I found out that she was in it, Emmy Rossum, and then. But it's a Clint Eastwood movie, so it's like anything he does is good, from the script to his directing to the music. It's just all flows. So I really don't think who the actors he has in his movies make a difference, but I think he makes them better. So, but yeah, it was a great movie.
Well, a couple of things. Did you watch it with your wife?
I didn't watch this one with my wife.
I was thinking, well, hey, this show is bringing husband and wives together again. So at least with Scott, they're watching movies. Yeah, because I think you watched with your wife the last time, right?
Yeah, because we were in. It was a thunderstorm in Tennessee. You'll love those, Danny. And I mean, they're short lived, but they'll drop 3 inches of rain in 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But so we watched it because we're stuck inside our RV because our house isn't finished yet. So we just sat there and watched that movie. So yeah, you're bringing couples together.
Yeah.
So,
I'm surprised we didn't watch this one because a murder mystery fanatic, 2020, 48 hours,
yeah.
anything with detectives and murders
Yeah.
but
So is my beautiful wife. She's listening upstairs. She is my number one fan, and she critiques whenever I make mistakes. She's upstairs listening right now. Hello, Patricia. So the other thing I wanted to bring up. So next week, I think it's May 12th to May 18th is Police Week, and Clint Eastwood has made a challenge. Anybody who donates to the National Memorial for Police Memorial, Law Enforcement Memorial, he will match that donation. I mean, that's a national challenge. So I don't know if they donate $1 million, he's going to donate $1 million. Now he's got it, but so I do appreciate that because it's not popular for Hollywood to stand up for cops, but Clint Eastwood, being Clint Eastwood, he's going to do whatever he's going to do, right? And so he's standing up to support cops. He's and we had a conversation just before we aired about Adam Rick, I can't remember the guy that stars in. Yeah, he stars in what the hell is the series he's starring in now? It's Reacher, right? And I like the series too, but he made some bullshit comments about cops recently, and he got called out by the FOP. Then he whined even more about it, So it's popular for people to build up their following on Twitter and Facebook or wherever by bashing the cops. But Clint Eastwood, he ain't having none of it. He's standing up for the cops. He's saying you make a donation to the National Law Enforcement Memorial, and I will match that donation. So just so people know, and I'll educate folks if you haven't heard me talk about it before. In 1962, John Kennedy established May 15th is the day that we will honor the men and women law enforcement who sacrificed their lives in the line of duty for this nation. It is the Police Memorial Day. That is morphed into Police Week or Police Memorial Week, which is held in Washington, D.C. every May 12th to the 18th. They do have a California version they do up in Sacramento. We do a day here in L.A. County for those people who sacrifice their lives in keeping L.A. County safe. So go ahead and check out the National Memorial website and make a donation, and Clint will match that donation. Did you guys know that?
No.
No? Well,
know that, but that guy's never wobbled with his backing of police officers, law enforcement.
Yeah, we give him so much material to do movies on.
Well, it's funny though, they'll bash cops, but when it comes to getting paid to do a cop movie, they're all in being cops.
Yeah, they're all in, and then they want to ride with the cops so they can learn how to do it right and do all that drama, and it's like, but it's funny because we've done a lot of movies, and when you look at the people from Clint's era or just before Clint's era. And I'm talking Jimmy Stewart and a lot of Charles Bronson and those folks. A lot of them served in the military. A lot of them served in World War II. I mean, Clark Gable served. I think he was a tail gunner. And a lot of these guys. I mean, who's the other guy? The man who shot Liberty Valance, Lee Marvin. He was a Marine. He fought. I think it was Tarawa. I think he was injured. And he says it was a brutal, bloody campaign. And now we got all these actors and actresses who don't have any real life experience. They just don't. Hey, Penny, good morning. They don't have any real life experience, and then they're going out spouting out with no experience. I mean, even Clint Eastwood was in the military. He may not have gone to war, but he was in the military. And I think, I'm trying to think of Magnum PI, what's his name, if he was
Tom Selleck?
I think he was. So, I mean, he plays a cop, but these guys who have this broad life experience that isn't channeled through the drama department of their high school and college, and they tend to have a much more conservative or moderate points of view. And I know that's not what the movie's all about, but what do you think, Scott?
About
Yeah, about just, if you have more life experience, military, you tend to have a broader point of view, and
Yeah,
that's
I
probably what
mean,
young people are missing.
well, like I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, and from day one, the Marine Corps strips everything away. Like I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's like, "Yeah, um, they let him keep some personal items," and I'm like, "They stripped us bare naked, threw everything in a box, taped it shut with your name and social security number on it." That was, and then they gave you what you were gonna wear. There was no racism. There was no, Marines were all called the same, no matter what color, where you came from, what part of the country. You're all just trying to be Marine. So they just, they shave your head, so you all look like a bunch of eggheads running around. So and then they slowly build you back up to the way they want you to be, and it all falls down on integrity, personal responsibility, doing what's right, helping others is a big thing. The whole Marines will send, 30 guys in to get one wounded guy out. And they may come back with just one guy and the wounded guy, but that's okay because they got the wounded guy. But I mean, and mission first. Like when I had TIU, a lot of people complained, well, you take a lot of ex-military guys. Well, because they know what it's like to sacrifice and spend long hours for nothing. Or not just nothing, but for doing a job. They understand what the task is. Where other people like, I've already worked 8 hours. Why do I got to work 4 more? Because we still have stuff to do.
Yeah.
You don't get a lot of that with guys from the military.
Yeah, Danny, I'll let you jump in here because I think sometimes maybe we pamper the kids too much, and so they start spouting out because they don't have any life experience. Although I suspect if you're raised by a cop, you probably get a little more opinions coming from dad, right? So what do you think, Danny?
It's all about the life experience. Just like when you get a trainee, the first thing you go is you go through his jacket and his background, if he has any military or where he grew up, and it's like Scott said. I was never in the military, but Marine Corps, you break them down and build them up. It's similar with a trainee. You break them down to build them up so that they can survive hopefully a 30-year career and come out safe at the other end. But yeah, life experience. Nowadays, these kids just don't have any life. Their life experience is going to Coachella, going to Stagecoach. There's no real I had to really work for it, or
Yeah.
like you said, the way you raise your kids. It's tough love.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to admit it, but if you don't have some tough love there, who knows what your kids are going to go wild. So.
Well, let's roll the first scene playing in the streets because it kind of dovetails into what we're talking about. And what I recognize about this was, although I didn't play hockey with my buddies in the streets, we were out of the house, doing whatever, playing with the friends on the street, or even if you didn't have friends with you, you're out. I remember building. I had those little green soldiers, and we had right by the curb, you get some dirt built up and you put the guys, like they're fighting a battle. I mean, just, you weren't in the house doing Game Boy or whatever, Nintendo. I'm probably dating myself. Game Boy's early, Nintendo or Xbox. You're out playing in the dirt. You're out playing in the street. And yes, you lost your balls. You lost the ball every now and then into the street gutters there that they had there. And so playing in the street, you don't see that very much anymore, right? And yet that was a big part of character development and learning to get along with people, right? That's where people are, they get on their game box or whatever, Xbox, and they talk to somebody in China who's playing Soldier of Fortune with them. It isn't the same. And that's what I liked about this scene. This scene. This is my experience growing up. Although, in addition, we had a kind of a little bit of chess club going on my block too, as you could probably guess. Okay, Jordan played chess as a kid. Yeah, I did that too. But it was all outside of the house, right? Parents kicked us out. Come home when the lights come on, right? And was this your experience too, Scott?
Oh yeah, we played. I mean, I grew up in Western Washington, so it was often wet and rainy, but we had a huge cedar tree in our backyard. So underneath that, it was always dry. So we would go down there and play with our Tonka trucks and our Army men. And then if it was not, it wasn't raining, the whole neighborhood would play wiffle ball in the street. We lived on a cul-de-sac, and then it was like, oh, if it bounces off so and so's roof and into their yard, that's a double. if you hit it over the back curb, that's a home run. Yeah. So then we'd go up to the local school and play football in the schoolyard. So my mom wouldn't let us into the house.
Yeah, I
Nice
wasn't
summer
into
day.
hockey. These guys played hockey. Yeah, they wanted you out because they wanted to clean. They didn't
Right.
need you underfoot. Just get out of the house, turn off the TV, go outside, and and don't touch the air conditioning. We had air conditioning. Don't touch the air. You just get out. Let's just get out, right? So, Danny, playing in the street, was that something that?
Oh, exactly. I grew up in Cerritos in like 1970 when Cerritos was still dairy pastures, and my dad bought a brand new house there for like $18,000, but I was lucky because the block I lived on was nothing but boys from probably 8 years old up to like 14 or 15. So there was like 10 or 11 of us on the same street. So we had enough people to play, baseball, basketball, football, and and everything was done in the street. So
Yeah.
You played baseball in the street, whatever it was. But yeah, we were out from 9 o'clock in the morning until the street lights came on. Everybody took a break for lunch and then came back, but we were never maybe on Saturdays to watch cartoons in the morning, but by 9 o'clock you were gone. You're
out.
Yeah.
and it was a different time. You go play at the school ground, but
I had this uncle. He actually was a Wayne County sheriff, and he didn't have a family right away. And he actually bought us a pool, above ground pool, big. And so in the summertime, people would come to our house and end up in the pool, right? On a hot day, particularly July, August, early part of September. So we always had people around. But yeah, I think when I watch a scene playing in the street now, our kids, this wouldn't be normal for them. Right? They would look at this and go, wow, this is a bygone era. We don't do this, right?
I mean, I live right here in Irvine. There's 100,000 kids in this area I live in. You never see them in the street playing. The only thing they're in the street for is riding their e-bikes. And that's about it. But you never see them out there interacting or playing football or baseball or.
We got a family that has a house just adjacent, and they got 3 boys all around the same age. You'll see them throwing basketball through the hoop there. That's about it. You don't see them running around the street doing any kind of stuff on go-karts or riding their bikes or any of that kind of stuff. But I enjoyed this scene because that's what I identified with. But now, obviously, this scene is the lead into Tim Robbins' character as a young boy getting kidnapped by 2 pedophiles, and which probably has helped to drive why the stranger danger, why we don't let our kids just go out. I mean, I think about get out of the house, and we weren't worried about this at the time. That we didn't have the social media that amplified this. There wasn't the awareness of pedophiles and sexual abuse by predators, unknown predators, that I was aware of growing up. But now we are very well aware of that. I'm sure that has contributed to some degree of parents being closely monitoring their kids, right? What do you think, Danny? You got daughters?
Yeah, same thing. I never thought of that when I was a kid. I mean, we were always with boys, and you never expect that a boy's going to get into it. You always expect maybe it's a female that's going to get taken, but no, that was like way out. You never even thought about that. It never entered your mind then. In 1970s, that wasn't a problem, But
I don't think I really became aware of that as an issue until I actually joined the sheriff's department and go, what? Mm-hmm. They do what? So, but Scott, same thing. Yeah, these weren't things we talked. They weren't out there like they are now, right?
Oh no, in the 70s, early 70s, we, like I said, but I had it really good. I mean, we lived at the bottom of a cul-de-sac where it flattened out because it was hilly all the way. It was a hill all the way down to the lower part of the cul-de-sac, and we lived at the very end of it. So, plus everybody knew everybody. So,
Yeah.
if a strange car drove down the cul-de-sac, everybody's watching it,
Right.
and we never had to worry.
Well, now
about
you're
that.
lucky if you even really know your neighbor.
Yeah.
Where back then you knew your neighbor, your neighbor's neighbor, the guy 10 houses down. Everybody knew everybody. So it was like, if one of the parents saw you somewhere you weren't supposed to be, it was like, hey, you might want to, get back over here, or, does your dad know you're over here, or, that type of thing. But yeah, nowadays you're lucky if you know the guy living 2 feet next to you.
Yeah, and the parents would look out for you guys. We got a comment from Mountain, and now they're trying to basically normalize this inappropriate behavior between adults and children. I do agree with that. It's crazy that how they're. I mean, they reduced the punishment in California for adults having sex with minors here, believe it or not, and they changed the Megas law, so the reporting and all this stuff. It's lunacy what they're doing. I think they did pass a law here where, you know how we had the law where you could arrest people who were lording with intent to commit prostitution. Well, that was one of the easy tools that we had to intercede with people on the streets, and if they are being a victim, to get them into the system, right? But they took that away from us, and it's some guy, Scott Wiener, up in Northern California, ultra leftists and liberals. No, we don't want this because it's bad. And they said it's because cops discriminate against transgender. That's why he said the reason they got rid of it. And it was just bullshit lies to change the law, because some people see interacting between adults and children a lot different than we see it. But this is a situation where he does get kidnapped. The guy is acting like he's a cop, right?
Yeah.
And to get him into the car, I mean, they jam him up about riding on some wet cement, which is nothing really. But he doesn't know it because he's a kid, and he mistakenly gets in the car. I mean, and that's what we teach kids: just go home. They can come meet you at home, right? So what do you think of that final scene, Scott?
Well, I mean, back then, cops had a different type. You didn't mess with the cops. If the cops told you to do something, you did it.
Right.
There wasn't any. I mean, I got arrested when I was a juvenile.
You did?
Well, I was detained. I was detained, and then I grew up in a small town, so I was detained and then driven home later.
Which is how we used to do it, right? Do you remember the old GIFs, right?
Right.
Jeffs, yeah.
Yeah.
GIFs, remember that, Danny? You
Yeah.
want to explain, to our audience, explain what a GIF is, just so that they know.
GIF was just like it was a non-criminal half sheet report, and you just filled out the GIF, and then you gave it to whoever the parent was, I believe. But it was just like I don't know why the GIF even existed. I mean, you could just.
You know what? It was to keep kids out of the criminal justice system. It was, you write it down and you preserve it, but you go and talk to the parents and said, okay, Susie, shoplifted a candy bar from the candy store. And I do think we went to zero tolerance, and that probably went a little too far on stuff in law enforcement. But I always liked the GIF because you got a chance to talk to the kid. All right, because I was a night detective, so I'd have to talk to him. Like, okay, all right, we're just going to do a GIF on this one and give mom a call. And all right, you want to come get him, or I'll drop him off. But here's the deal: you got to talk to him, and we can't have this happening, right? And lots of times, if this was their first introduction to law enforcement, it was the last time for them, right? So I always thought it was a valuable tool, and we kind of moved away from it. In fact, I don't remember it in policy. I was looking for the GIF in policy later in my career, and I couldn't find it. So
it just kind of disappeared.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so yeah, we did at that time. They did listen to cops. They don't now.
No.
And we were unaware of that. But let's show the scene with Tim Robbins, because I did want to talk a little bit about Tim Robbins in the scene. And that was when they were kids, and then they transfer forward to here he is right here, where they're adults. So that was the backstory to what is going on with Tim Robbins and the relationship that Sean Penn has with Tim Robbins and who's our third main guy, Kevin Bacon. So they all know each other and they all go in their different directions. And there's our bad guy cop, right? And so this Tim Robbins guy is flashing back. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this is what I've addressed on this show, I've addressed on my other show, is there is post-traumatic stress. Victims of sexual assault, they deal with post-traumatic stress and they deal with it for the rest of their life. And it kind of implies that Tim Robbins is kind of this very protective dad, but kind of a mopey guy in this movie, and it's because of what happened to him as a kid. He's getting through life, but he still struggles with post-traumatic stress. So Scott, post-traumatic stress, victims that you've dealt with, your own experiences, it's a real thing and it happens, right?
Yeah, it's I've been involved in several things that give you post-traumatic stress, but everybody has to deal with it in their own way. And so I don't know, I try to turn it into something positive, that it gave me some life experience that most people will never experience. So I think Tim Robinson did. I mean, like I said, I'm not a fan of his politics or whatever, but he did a great job in this movie as the guy dealing with the aftermath of what happens to these kids. And the sad thing is, like you were saying earlier, that, we have these politicians that think that, oh, it's okay to do this, but it's not. These kids have to deal with this they grow up to be adults and they have to deal with it. I mean, being held captive for, what do you say, 4 days. And then, I mean, how do you, I mean, some people can recover from it, but other people just can't put it in the past. So I say, people say, well, how do you deal with post-traumatic? I just say it's in the past. I can't change what happens in the past. The past is the past. So you can either move forward or you can stay in the past and you'll never go anywhere.
I was doing commentary on the Nashville shooting, so that with the Christian school. So I did a show, and they asked me about the response, and then the body cam footage was released, and so they asked me to watch it and then come back on a couple days later. And so I was watching that body cam footage, and oh my God, my adrenaline started rushing. It's like I was there. and that's, for me, that's part of post-traumatic stress, that you go right back to those situations that you experienced, because of the reminders of things that you see, right? But I think it's important. Tim Robbins clearly is suffering from his abuse, and you see that throughout the movie, and it does ultimately impact what happens with him in terms of his behavior. But hey, they also show some of the other characters in here that we see. Sean Penn, we get introduced to him, the adult Sean Penn, and he seems like this community leader is what he appears. He owns a market. He seems to have it all together, but he also seems to be all that in the show. He seems like he's successful in the movie. And we see his daughter, and she played Fiona Gallagher in Shameless. And this is the first time we see her. And she was also in the movie. Remember the movie with Dennis Quaid, I think it was, The Day After Tomorrow, where suddenly all the weather changes.
Oh, yeah, the hurricane tornado movie.
She played the little love interest and was trapped in New York with his son, right? And
Yep.
So she was in. I go, oh yeah, she was in that movie too. But we begin to see all the different actors that are going to be in this movie, including Sean Penn. And I will say, Sean Penn did a great job in this movie. He kind of a narcissistic guy. I'm in charge. Here we go. We got a comment. Robbins and Penn are way out of touch and have less than optical political positions, but man, they sure can act. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I like Sean Penn, and when I did see Fast Times at Ridgemont High in the theater.
Yeah.
That was like,
yeah, and he was in that other one, Bad Boys, or he's in a Juvenile.
Yeah, Bad Boys.
Yeah.
He's got everybody's got their political views, and Sean Penn, Tim Robbins, but I tell you what, I have a lot of respect for Sean Penn because he puts it on the line. He
Right.
actually goes to war zones. He goes to interview people, and he puts it out there. I mean, he might say, "Hey, this is what," but he actually does it. Where some of these other ones, they talk the talk, but they're doing it from
Well, I have a hard time because if you understand, like he went down and talked to Maduro, I believe,
Yeah.
in Venezuela, and Maduro is, they would say, oh, well, he's socialist. No, he's a dictator. They just used democracy and socialism as an excuse to take over the country, and the people now being enriched are him, his family, and his allies, and everybody else is being impoverished. When if you look at what happened in the old Soviet Union, if you look at what happened in Cuba, it's when you switch political systems from democracy and economic system from capitalism and communism, all you're doing is changing who the elites are going to be. That's all you're doing. And you create a situation where the dictator decides who gets what, whereas in a capitalist society, yes, there are oligarchs, yes, there are people who pull strings for power, but you have a greater chance for upward mobility or social climbing in a democracy based upon capitalism than you do in a Marxist a dictatorship like we have with Maduro and who's the other one? Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua. So when Sean Penn goes down to visit Maduro, it's like, okay, dude.
He went down there and visited another one too. I can't think of the name. He's done it several times, but
yeah, if they were socialist, okay, all right, I guess I can. But they're not. They're dictators who are just stealing their people blind and pretending like they care about them. That's what it looks like to me. I mean, even if you look at China, I mean, China, the CCP is in charge, but if you're connected, you're allowed to get rich. If you're not, you're not. That's just the way it is. So
one of my doctors is she born and raised and grew up until her mid-20s in Romania, which is a socialist country.
Yeah.
And she shakes her head and says, these people that spout how they want socialism know nothing about it. She goes, these kids in college that say socialism is the best way to go know nothing about it. She says the only people that flourish in a socialist or communist regime are the politicians and the oligarchs. The rest of you are just working to try to get by.
So he interviewed El Chapo. The whole thing blew up in his face. Yeah, Sean Penn.
That was the one.
Yeah. Why would you do that? And I agree with you, Scott. I think our teachers are teaching, which is why the show I'm going to do tomorrow, I'm going to talk about the Heterodox Academy, which is where they want to get back to where we're teaching people how to think instead of teaching people what to think. And all of our professors that are supporting this would be they'd have to pass the test whether they're socialist or supportive enough. They wouldn't be able to have any original thoughts like they claim to have now, but they wouldn't have the freedom that they have now.
No,
but yeah,
we have a friend and their son wouldn't go to a certain state with them because he said that it was stolen from the people. And it's like, well, your college that you went to was stolen from the Indians, but I guess that's okay because that's where you went to school. But
I just love this whole who's the colonizer, we see that going on with Israel, all that stuff. Well, let's show the next scene, Kevin Bacon and death. Let's see. So we get introduced into Kevin Bacon. He ends up. So I mean, Sean runs a market. He's kind of the big wheel in the neighborhood. Tim Robbins is kind of just getting through life, but he's definitely focused on raising his son. And here's Kevin Bacon's character, Sean, and he's a Massachusetts state policeman, and he gets the call on the homicide involving Sean Penn's daughter, Katie, right? Ultimately, and him and Lawrence Fishburne are the detectives, and but I always liked Kevin Bacon. I know he's out there politically too. He's not as much out there, but I thought he was a good actor, and he has connections with a lot of these guys. They kind of all came up in the same era, right? In different movies where they would intersect, compete for parts, I imagine. But I always like him. I think he does a pretty good job as an actor. What'd you think of his acting, Scott?
Oh, I like Kevin Bacon, and I think he did a great job as a cop in this. I think him and Lawrence Fishburne played off each other real well. Where Lawrence Fishburne was a sergeant and he was just a detective, but the back and forth which is true with partners, as Danny can attest to, is you're always busting each other's chops all day, and I think Lawrence Fishburne was, he's a sergeant, so I assume he's been a little more experienced than Kevin Bacon. But I think later on, Lawrence Fishburne falls into a trap that a lot of detectives fall into, is trying to make the evidence or the suspect fit the evidence instead of the
Yes.
evidence fitting the suspect.
I'm glad you said that because I agree with that. I think Lawrence Fishburne got locked in on Tim Robbins' character and directed in that direction instead of just following the evidence. Because the gun evidence was critical, and yet he's still following this loose end, his feelings instead of the evidence. I agree with that. But I think it did, and I like Lawrence Fish. I mean, obviously the character had to do that because this plot had to go in the direction that it had to go, right? And but the other thing is this Irish pub back east. I think this is Massachusetts, and I don't remember the gals getting on the bar, but I do remember Irish pubs like this because I visited many, even though I was not of age before I moved to California. We used to go bar hopping when I was in high school. I don't tell a lot of those stories, but that's what it was. And so this just reminded me of the typical neighborhood Irish pub. And she's blowing off steam before, and we find out later, before she leaves town. And Tim Robbins, of course, having PSD, is in the bar drinking, watching the game, right? So this is where they end up connecting him with Katie. But yeah, Irish pubs and hanging out at the neighborhood bar. That was the other thing that I was used to in Detroit, that when I came to LA, there were some, but they just weren't as prevalent. So did you have the typical or not Irish, or just neighborhood pub in Washington, Scott?
Well, like I said, I grew up in a small town, but there's a couple bars that I could grow facial hair, so I would go in there. Plus, my grandfather was a frequent flyer at many of them that I would actually, back in the late 60s, early 70s, he would take me into the bar.
Yeah.
One was called the White Pig Tavern. And he'd take me in there and sit me on a stool while him and his shipyard worker buddies would sit around and drink and cuss and tell stories. And I'd sit there drinking squirt until he was ready to leave. And then we'd walk home.
Yeah, there was a neighborhood pub that when I was in high school we would go to called the Tipperary. There was a few of them. In fact, we were bar hopping one St. Patrick's Day, and one of our teachers was in Dunleavy's, was another bar, and he brought us around. so it was, when you grow up in Detroit where there's so many other things, urban ills going on, they weren't worried about a bunch of kids getting a beer, having a beer on St. Patrick's Day. So Danny, what do you think? Any neighborhood bars and Cerritos that you remember at all that going
actually,
into?
Artesia, there were a couple
okay.
neighborhood ones where that were there, Viking Lounge, and then there was another one. But most of the time it was your parents or your friends' parents that hey, where's your dad at? Oh, he's over at the Viking, across the street or whatever. But yeah, there was a couple, not a lot, but there was a couple there. But Tim Robbins, and I wanted to say, if you actually read the book or the Audible book, it actually, there's so many layers to this movie that it actually builds up their characters and their personalities as to why he ended up getting kidnapped and why it wasn't Sean and why it wasn't Jimmy. So it more in the depth as why they took him.
Because he was, I don't want to say softer.
Exactly.
More pliable because he was.
Well, they knew Sean was because the detective who takes him, while the predator says, yeah, Sean, he looks too smart, which he ends up being because he's from a different part of town. And he's a college kid, ends up being a college kid. And he said, Jimmy is just straight up crazy. And he would have just took off running. So that's why they took Dave. Because they said, hey, Dave's, kind of dumb and not really a hanger-oner with these two guys. He's just there. So, and as you
Yeah, I
get
didn't
into
know
the
that.
movie, Jimmy just says the same thing, thinking back, hey, if we would have gotten into the car, things would have been different, and Katie wouldn't have probably been murdered. She would never existed. So it kind of gives you background there.
Yeah, what they think.
Yeah.
So the neighborhood telephone thing, when somebody's missing, right? I mean, what I did notice, hey, where's so and so? You just kind of started asking, and everybody else would ask, hey, and they would call their friends. I mean, we have a process on the sheriff's department we go through, but back in the day, you didn't have TV or radio ads on, talking about missing person. It was, you just did the neighborhood telephone service, right? Hey, so and so, do you know where Pat's at? Do you know that? And people start asking because Mrs. Jordan's looking for her son, or they're looking for their daughter, or
Yeah,
whoever,
and that
right?
goes back to them playing in the street, and the dad's watching them play hockey, and
Yeah.
they come back and they go, hey, the cops just took Dave, and the dad's like, what do you mean the cops took Dave? What did he look like? And the next thing you know, the balls start rolling. They're looking for Dave.
Yep.
And, phone calls are being made and call the police station.
Yeah, the parents take action, but the whole neighborhood take action. You see that both with the disappearance of Dave, who fortunately they didn't really explain how he got away, but he maybe in the book they did, but he gets away. But also when Katie shows up missing, the same kind of dynamic happens, although it's many years later, right?
Right.
It's still the neighborhood. They're still looking out for each other. The kids grow up there. Everybody knows who they are in the immediate neighborhood. And I think this is based near Boston. Mystic River's in Boston, right? So it is a big town, so you can't get lost. You can go to another side of town. Nobody knows who you are. But in that neighborhood, they start looking and they start asking. And that's, I mean, since you don't know who your neighbors are now,
Yeah.
So I moved into a townhome area complex, and I didn't mix it up a lot when I was still working, right? But I got married, and my beautiful wife, now she knows everybody. She knows the dog's name, she knows all the cats' names, she knows everybody's name. So they all know who we are, right? And so now you can ask, hey, do you know where Pat is or Patty is, and people know what you're talking about. They can ask about. But since we have this disconnect now, where kids they might not even know the kids' names of the kids that just live a couple houses away, right?
Oh,
So
exactly.
that part is different.
But I think it's also where you live. Like for me in Tennessee, people are a lot more open. Like you'll go into Walmart and you'll get the cashier's whole life story while she's checking you out.
That's why I love it back there. You go to we're going in a couple weeks, but you go to the Costco there in Nashville, and you usual Costco, whatever, but you get out of the car, and first thing you know, you go get your basket, you go into your shopping, and you go to check out, and first hey, do you want us to take your groceries to your car and load them for you? Or it's like, no, we're good. Are you sure? Da 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 da. Get out there, load your groceries. Somebody asks, hey, you want us to take your card in? And it's just a whole different atmosphere, especially when you go out to dinner or out to breakfast or anything there. It's just, everybody's there it seems like there to help each other.
Yeah,
get to know each other.
Everybody that I mean, when I first moved there, not a lot of people would talk to me because I had California plates. But once I put on the Tennessee plate and a Marine Corps plate on the front, because you only have to have one plate, all of a sudden, hey, how you doing? And then my neighbor luckily grew. I mean, we're in a small county, so he grew up there, and his wife was a principal there. So he'd tell everybody, no, these are good people. They're great. They're the people we want around here. They're the people that are, aren't.
Yeah, you definitely have to have somebody vouch for you.
Yeah,
that's a definite.
So now every few months we live on a road, but from one end of the road to the other end of the road, everybody comes out and we have like a huge potluck all day, and it's the kids playing and everybody gets to know each other, and it's a lot of fun actually. There's not a lot of drinking or anything like that.
Well, then you go out there and you think, okay, you're out there, everybody's from there, they're from Tennessee, but we were out there last year, and we were down in Spring Hill, so we were going to stop and get some breakfast, and we stopped at this little boutique kind of breakfast place, and waffles and pancakes, but I wanted breakfast like bacon and eggs or some breakfast burrito. And so we're getting ready to pull off, and the guy goes, "Hey, where are you going?" I'm going, "Oh, I want a breakfast." I didn't see him. He goes, "Oh no, I'll make you one. I got a griddle in there." So we end up parking, end up eating, get my breakfast burrito, and the girl says, "Oh, my husband's really proud of this burrito. When we moved out here, he couldn't find one, so he started making his own." And I go, "Where are you guys from?" She goes, "Oh, we're from Long Beach, California." And I'm thinking, Long Beach? I go, "We used to live in Belmont Shore in Long Beach." She goes, "Really?" I go, so I was eating the burrito, and she goes, "How do you like it?" I go, it's a great burrito." I go, "Tell him it tastes just like a Tams burrito." So she back there, and next thing I know, he's coming out, and he goes, "How do you know about Tams?" I go, "Man, we grew up in Belmont Shore, Long Beach too." He goes, "Oh man, what a coincidence! Small world, He goes, "Yeah, I had to make my own breakfast burrito because it wasn't really dialed in like I was used to." But I go, "Well, you got it down." But yeah, you just meet people that are like, you think they might be from there, but then they end up in California, somewhere else, and I don't know. I just like the whole atmosphere.
Yeah, one thing I learned about California when I moved here is there's always so much going on, and there's so many things to do because the weather's always so nice that people are doing it, and they're not engaged as much. I just noticed that you throw a party and you get a California reservation, maybe a third of them will show up. Oh yeah, we're all coming, and only a third show up. So, hey, let's get
Yeah.
into one more scene before the break,
Okay.
and this is Katie's death, right? And and it's just so there's a couple things about this scene. It's so Sean has got, or Kevin Bacon's character has got the scene, and he looks at her. I don't think he knows her as an adult, but he sees here's Katie. Now the neighbor is looking for her. They find the body. He gets the call. They got it blocked off. It's adjacent. I didn't remember, or I didn't understand it. It's either adjacent to Boston or it's one of those jurisdictions that's in Boston, but the state guys
I think
got
it's
the
a
handle.
state park.
A state park. Okay. So it's probably in Boston, but it's state park. So the Stadies are handling it and Boston's there. And it's interesting patchwork of jurisdictions, I guess, in Boston, because I did Departed. So, I mean, a lot of it was in Boston, but the Stadies were the ones doing a lot of the work. But we got him, they're looking at the body. But the other part of this is shows Sean Penn. He's in church. And his youngest daughter's getting baptized, or not getting baptized, going through her first communion.
Yeah.
And, I just wrote notes because that reminded me so much of growing up and going to Catholic schools. You had to go get your, do your confession, right? And then go through all the classes, get your confirmation. The guys are in their little suits with their break-off ties, right? And the girls are in these little, white dresses that look like they're, little wedding dresses. And so that did remind me of growing up and my experience in going to Catholic school. So Danny, you're shaking your head a little bit there. Is that similar to what you experienced
because I went
growing
to
up?
Catholic school too. Yeah, I went to Catholic school, so you go through first communion, confirmation, all that stuff, and you still, I don't know, it's because I went to both Catholic school and public school, and there's complete opposites. But you still get. I was an boy, but yeah, that scene there is pretty much the end. This movie really follows the book really good. But yeah, and Sean Penn won an Academy Award for this, and but I think that scene there where they find Katie and she's dead, where he just goes crazy, was probably a reason why he won it, because that acting part there for him to do, he had to dig deep from somewhere.
Yeah, I like the, I'm not used to victims' families going off like that, but being upset, yes, and but also you can see, I was putting myself in the role of Sean in this one. Oh God, I got to talk. This is his kid. I got to talk to my old friend who I probably don't have any connects with, but we were kids, and I have to tell him what's going on, and that's a completely different dynamic, right, Scott? When it's somebody, the victim is somebody you know, and you have to interact with the family, and you know the family, right?
Right. It's,
So
I mean, working gangs, you go to a lot of, shootings, and sometimes, you got to be the ones that go to the family for whatever reason because you're asked to do it. Because, working gangs, a lot of times you have a relationship. I mean, I did it for 10 years, and you have a relationship with a lot of these families because you've dealt with their kids several times, and it's not a pleasant. Giving a death notification is not pleasant, no matter whether they were gunned down in the street or they were in a car accident. A couple times at Carson, I had to do the late night knock on the door type thing, and it's not a. I don't know how I would handle it. And Sean Penn did an incredible job showing that emotion of what of what somebody finds out your daughter's been murdered, and I thought he did a great job because and from Kevin Bacon's, I don't know what I would do if it was somebody that I grew up with.
right,
To tell him.
Yeah, what's even worse is I had a couple instances when working patrol where the victims were sons or daughters of a deputy,
Oh,
and both times the parent deputy was on scene, and man, there's just nothing, and especially when you know him personally and you know the kid, and it's like, man, you're just
well, that
there's no words, man. You can't do any but soul, and because it hits everybody.
well, we had a plane crash in Carson, and it was a plane that took off from Compton Airport. We get the call, we get out there, and it was one of the deputies that was working's father was that deceased pilot. And I don't think he ever, after seeing that, I think he ended up retiring from the department, but I don't know how I would
Yeah.
deal with that.
death notifications are, I always hated doing them, but fortunately I never had to do them with anybody that I actually knew or had a relationship with, and I still hated it. I didn't like it at all. I think the other thing, I have a daughter. Scott, you got a daughter. Danny, you got a daughter. I mean, we worry about our kids, but there's still a little extra worry about your daughters, right? No matter how you slice it, daddy's going to always have this little soft spot and worry about his daughter, where she's at, who she's with. Doesn't matter how old she is, and you can see that with Sean Penn. He's protective, and that's another part. I don't know if they got into it in the book, Danny, but there's always, your kid dies before you, dies of violence, and you feel this obligation to protect your kid. And there's a little bit of guilt.
Well, it does get into it a little more in the book, and I really suggest you either do the Audible or read the book, because it just goes a little bit more in depth with each of the characters and what he's thinking. And that first scene where they're in the liquor store and she's getting ready to leave, and she gives him that stare, and he goes, that's the same kind of look I got from the ex-wife, Marita. And, it was kind of like, I'm going to see you later, but I'm not. So he gets into that a little bit more. And the book, I'm a big Audible book guy, so I'll listen to him when I'm in the car. But yeah, the book is really good. The movie, like I said, the book follows the movie pretty good, except some little in-depth parts. But there's more in depth with the lieutenant that's running this task force with Whitey and Sean and things like that. Because there's actually a task force in the book, but yeah, it's the characters are really thought more in the book. And
yeah, you have to pick up these emotions with the characters that are explained in the book. But it's time for a break. So Martine, go ahead and roll the break, and we will pick up on the other side. The suspicious wife that Dave is married to, and her belief that he might be involved. So let's go ahead and go, Martina. If we're ready, go ahead and go with our break. And if you guys need to use the facilities, now is the time.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all. Movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis. Official scoops from Geekosity magazine. Reviews and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Where they're always talking nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
So welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We have our guests, Detective Danny Regalado and Sergeant Scott Orr. We're talking about the movie Mystic River. So they arrived at the crime scene and they start just doing their thing. They're establishing a timeline. They're talking to the most likely people that have knowledge of who she is. But they also show a scene where Dave comes home that morning, early in the morning, with blood, which is. It's then later his wife, and this is, of all the characters I didn't care for very much, it's his wife Celeste Boyle, right? She immediately suspects him of murder, and yet there's nothing in his character that indicates that he's a predator or that he's a killer in any way, shape, or form. And but she suspects it pretty much right away, and she nurtures this pain instead of dealing with. I don't know if that's you or me, but instead of dealing with trusting her husband, she kind of throws him under the bus there eventually. So she's the one character I don't really care for in this movie. But they find out that Katie was going to leave town with her boyfriend, and they go talk to the boyfriend. And let's go ahead and roll that scene: boyfriend getting married. And you can see in the scene, and I think this guy does a pretty good job. He shows the actor, he shows the pain that he really loved her. You can see the tears in his eyes, and given Mom here and how she acted, I would want to leave too.
Yeah, poor Brendan was stuck.
He was stuck.
I think that scene with the mom, I don't think I think it's easy to overlook that part, because I think at the end, when the whole story comes out,
yeah,
I know they say it was a prank, but I think they were trying to stop her because they didn't want to be stuck with Mom without him.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, she's his utopia. She's his escape. They're supposed to elope together, and you can see the emotion there. And I don't know, Scott, when you're talking to somebody and you see the reaction that they find out when somebody dies, and they're potentially a suspect or they're just a survivor. Um, you can see that. You can see that lots of times when you tell them, "Hey, your loved one's passed away. This person's passed away," whether they're the bad guy, right? Does that happen? If they're a killer, if they're the killer, they go to sleep in the booking cage, right? If they're a survivor, they melt down because they actually lost somebody, right?
Right. You can tell. Um, there was a case I was working with homicide. It was a gang shooting, but it was kind of a weird. It just didn't feel right from the get go. There was something odd that this guy got kind of basically set up. So when I went with homicide to interview the mom and the people in the family, you could tell all the people were busted up about it. But one brother acted like it was a regular work, day of the week. You could see that something was up, and it turns out that he actually had his brother set up in the murder. So,
Wow.
but you could tell right away everybody else is busting, crying, and carrying on, and that's hard watching the families go through it. But then you look at the brother, and he's like he could give a crap that his brother was killed.
Now, okay, so you're reading a script, and you're reading the script to be the mom. Now, because we're talking about Sean Penn and Tim Robbins, but she does a really good job of playing this controlling, manipulative, despicable mom, right, in the scene. You can't go. You're just like your dad. You were going to leave just like your dad. Just denigrating, emotional abuse directed at her son. I think the actress did a pretty good job in the scene because I didn't like her, and I don't think anybody else did if they watched this scene, right? What do you think, Danny?
She's been in a lot of stuff. My wife knew who she was and some of the shows and movies that she's been in, but she's been like a character actress for years.
Yeah, she's been around for a while, and and she does a great part there because it kind of, well, it tells you why Brendan wants to leave. Not he's in love with Katie, but that's he needs to get out. And I don't know, in this scene right here, does his brother walk in too?
He does. They walk in and they walk by the brother doesn't talk, and he's with his friend, right? And they end up going into his bedroom. They just before the cops start talking about him, hey, this doesn't involve you. Go in there, and then they start talking to him, and you can see, for me, this was okay. My TV ESP is telling me these kids are involved. When I saw them walk through, they're the killers. They're involved.
Well,
right?
in the book, they walk into the interview, but they actually interact with Sean and Whitey. And Whitey, they ask Whitey, hey, is it okay? Can we go now? And Whitey tells them, well, you've never been detained here. Yeah, you can go. So it kind of gives you that they are already feeling guilty and they leave the room. But, Brendan's trying to tell them, hey, you guys need to go. Katie got killed last night. And they're like, surprised. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, like I said, my TV ESP was up. I go, okay, those guys did it. That's who, I mean, and I hadn't watched this movie in 20 years. So
but Scott's right, though, too.
I didn't remember who did it. So
but I agree with Scott, too. I think they did this not as a prank, but they didn't want Brendan to leave and be left alone with the mom, since Brendan always took care of Ray. And I think they were probably trying to scare her, but it went a little too far, and she ends up dead.
And I don't remember who this quote was attributed to. They do got a backstory with Kevin Bacon and his wife, which never really gets fully developed. But I know in my soul I contributed to your death, but I don't know how. So I don't know if that was Brandon who said it or Sean Penn's character said that. But a lot of guilt going, because I'm sure Brandon felt good. The father said it. So there's a lot of guilt going on here with these survivors, and that happens. I had Patricia Warnos on my class or my show, the other one, Briefing with the Chief, and she talked about that survivor's guilt for victims, which I think it gets way too overlooked by guys like George Gascon and these Soros-funded DAs. But that's another story that could go on for a long time. But it also, the other scene I noticed is, Dave Boyle has been attacked. He was kidnapped. He was sexually, and he walks his son to the bus every day. And you notice that, right? He ain't letting his kid just run there. Nope. No matter what's going on in his life, if he's hungover from drinking too many, Jamesons the night before, he's up in the morning to walk his kid to the bus because he's not going to let it happen to his kid. So let's show the scene Dave Boyle, because I think Tim Robbins had the most. His was the most interesting. I thought his was the most interesting character because you're waiting to see it develop. He's just this mopey guy, right?
Well, after everything that happened to him as a kid, he actually turns out to be a pretty good guy. I mean, you would think he'd be all more messed up than he actually is, but he feels the guilt, and then later on, what happens? He walks that kid to school every day, baseball practice every day.
And then they ask him, where were you at? It comes out that he was, he had seen her at the bar, and this is where they begin to start thinking that he might be a suspect. This is pretty tenuous, though, just because he was at the bar. There was multiple people at the bar and knew her, but he didn't really. And the issue that it really bothered me, and I think Lawrence Fishburne's character brought it up, well, he was a victim. He was sexually abused as a kid.
Yeah, Whitey jumps all over him,
So why would you think that? Just because they were abused as a kid, they would suddenly, kidnap and attack people themselves? I mean, I know that. Well, I don't know. I think there is some.
Well, Sean even tells him, "What do you mean, Dave Boyle? You actually want to look at Dave Boyle?" And then Whitey tells him, "Well, yeah, I just want to." I just want to take a quick look at him, And he goes, like you said, he's the lead investigator, Whitey, so he lets him dig into Dave Boyle a little bit.
Yeah, but right. But there's nothing in his background that would indicate that he would, if I would suggest if there's something that was going to manifest itself and you being a predator even after you were abused.
And he even brings him down to the station without telling Sean, and the next thing he's in the box. What do you mean he's in the box?
Yeah, I know, and I think they try to bluff him, and he kind of shuts.
But I like the part though when Whitey tows his car because it's 1029 Victor.
Yeah.
And then Dave Boyle turns back around on him when they're talking about the blood in the trunk, and he goes, "Well, I don't know. Maybe you should ask the guys that stole the car."
Completely, I know. He comes off way smarter than they expected. Yeah. And he completely shuts them down. Yeah.
Okay, there goes that.
Well, let's bring on the great Eli Wallach here. Let's see. The main things that made Whitey suspect was his head. Oh, that hand injury. Yeah, that's right. But we're not talking about a knife injury. That's the other thing. They talked about that injury, but I think he was attacked with a knife. Oh, and he beat somebody up. But we're not talking about blunt force trauma in the murder, right? That's not.
That's one thing that
shot her.
I told my wife is that Whitey is all over the fact that his hand's messed up, and he's been telling different stories how his hands got messed up, but nobody knows about the cut on his stomach.
Yeah.
But I said, well, there's no if it was blunt force trauma, they would either say that, it looks like somebody, beat her to death with their fist, because you can tell the difference.
Right.
And she wasn't.
She said they got beat to death with a hockey stick.
Right. Later, they say
that
they used they shot her and beat her with the hockey stick. So if she's going to have different marks, she's going to have, a rectangular type marking from a hockey stick as the blunt force trauma. And then, but like I said earlier, Lawrence Fishburne gets, Whitey gets into this Well, look at his
Exactly.
hand. Okay, well, what? Like I said, you know, I listen a lot. My wife and my daughter love the crime podcasts. They love all those different. And I'll walk in and go, that's the suspect right there. And they're like, how do you know that? They, you know, they tried the show's making it's like, no, that's because I always say, you know, who, why,
Yeah.
but
Well, Whitey gets tunnel vision on a date just because he was a victim when he was young.
right. And he says, oh, he looks like a guy back on his heels. Well, what does that mean? Just because a guy looks like, you know, he's had a tough life or whatever, doesn't act like I said earlier. A lot of detectives, I listen to these shows and then shows about, you know, where the investigation went wrong and the wrong guy goes to prison. And but if you look at the bottom line, it's because the detectives get locked into this. I'm going to make my this suspect that I believe did it fit the evidence.
Yep.
Instead of the evidence needs to fit the suspect. And they a lot of times they don't do that. Like he's his hand and he looks like a guy back on his heels.
Yep. And when I have Danny R. Smith on occasionally, and he was a homicide, and he says you got to follow the evidence. Just follow the evidence, and Whitey's not really following the evidence because gunshots and hockey stick. If they'd have been paying attention when they walked in on when Brendan was getting interviewed, one of the kids had a hockey stick, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but anyways, they key in on Dave. But let's show the let's roll right into the scene with Looney Liquor if we haven't shown that. And one, it's Eli Wallach. That's why I liked about I liked about this because as soon as you see him, you go, oh yeah, that's Eli Wallach. And he's I couldn't, was it Booney Liquor or Looney Liquor? I replayed that a couple times to listen. Or Cooney Liquor, maybe it could have been one of those. But he's the guy, and he talks about the robbery. And this is the interesting part where, so Ray Harris was the mom of Brendan, whose girlfriend was Katie, right? And that's the mom saying he left. He did this robbery. He did this robbery of this thing, and that's what Eli Wallach establishes, that he had hired somebody and fired him, and the guy had a mask on and came back and robbed him and fired a round off in the liquor store. It was recovered. They ran ballistics on it, and later it matched the ballistics to the gun that was used to kill Katie, which gives the linkage. And as you talked about, Scott, that is the path that you have to follow on this murder, right?
Right. You gotta. I mean, they got the gun matched to an earlier robbery. They go out and they're talking to the victim of the robbery, and then when he starts gives them the name, right away, Doyle's like, Sean's like, or not Doyle, but Sean's like, the light bulb goes on that it has to be Brendan or somebody associated with the Just Ray family.
Right. And right, and so this is a great scene though, because one, we got Eli Wallach in it,
Well,
but
Eli
it also
Wallach, he's
Go ahead.
adamant. He goes, I know who it was. It's just Ray Harris. You know.
Yep.
And
yeah, I like how he says it.
they
So
all-
do you
they
remember
all
who it
look at
was?
each other like, you know.
Do you remember his line? Do you remember who it was? Do I look senile to you?
Yeah.
Of course I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was Ray Harris. He came here a couple weeks later, big smile on his face, so I knew it was him, right? And they were looking for him for the case, but Ray Harris disappears, right?
Yeah.
But and we later find out. But that's anyway. So this was basic. I like how sometimes these shows they put this is the linchpin to helping to solve the case, and other people may not have realized it at this point because they're still going down this rabbit trail of Dave Boyle being the one, and but clearly Sean recognizes that, and I think Whitey even goes along with this at this point, and they actually go back to the station. And they check out who Ray Harris is and who his crime partners are, and they find out that one of his crime partners is Sean
Jimmy.
Penn.
Yeah.
Jimmy. Sean Penn. That they had a relationship, and that Ray Harris had dropped out of view, and nobody's seen him for years. But somebody's sending money to his wife to support him, so everybody thinks he's still alive. And we find out that Jimmy did time in the can for a case involving Ray Harris, and that Ray Harris was the informant. We see a couple different scenes to establish that, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
Ray Harris ends up being the snitch.
yeah,
That's why Jimmy does 2 years in the can. But Jimmy does it 2 years for his brother-in-law, the
yeah,
Savage brother.
yeah.
So it's all intertwined. But yeah,
Well, I think the other thing,
that's why Just Ray disappears.
the other thing
when
I
Jimmy
want,
gets
I
out.
wanted to talk about before we got into Jimmy as the crime partner, because I got a scene for that. But during this time, these traumatic events impact people with post-traumatic stress, and they begin to remember things. Things come back, right? When you have post-traumatic stress, there's triggers, right? Me watching the body cam footage triggered times when I was at the scene of shootings, and that whole emotion your body goes through. I think one of the scenes, and I don't have it here, is, but Dave starts talking about, he says, I think it was to his wife or to, I can't remember who he said it to, but he says Henry and George. Henry George. I never told people those were the names of the two guys.
Yeah, he tells the wife that.
Tells the wife that. Those are the names of the two guys that assaulted me. And he never told that to anybody anymore. So it just, the murder of Katie is bringing up all of these emotions for him, and he's beginning to remember things. And instead of his wife being supportive, she just goes, "Oh, one more reason." She's like Whitey. Okay, it's got to be him, right? She's doing her neighborhood detective stuff, right?
Yeah, he calls them both the wolves.
Yeah, the wolves.
He calls them the wolves. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
and
escaping the wolf, that he escaped from where they kidnapped him and put from the wolves through the forest.
Right, and of course he's confused. He can't. He can't. He doesn't really want to say what he did that night. I think he said he was mugged and he was attacked, but he really beat the hell out of some guy that was having sex with a kid. Right? That's what.
Yeah.
They end up showing that. He doesn't want to talk about that. I don't know why he just didn't say that, but he didn't, at least not initially, which helps foster her distrust. But still, I still think, God, you've been with this guy. You would have seen bad things from somebody if he was really a predator or somebody who was incredibly violent, and you don't get that.
He never really explained what happened to him throughout the movie or even in the book. But I think that's why he didn't say anything to her that, hey, I beat this pedophile to death, because until the very end of the movie, because he never revealed any of that. And I felt that if he told her that she would even think worse of him. That, well, what did they do to you?
Right.
So she puts another notch on the belt there for the poor guy. And
instead of going to Sean, she ends up, saying this to Jimmy, which we end up getting. Dave ends up getting murdered down the road, but down the line here. But let's go to Jimmy is the crime partner scene. And, they go back to the station and they're discussing it. And, just for the audience, you can look at previous crimes. You can look at who's who in the zoo, who's doing what with whom. We do have associations. We do field interview cards to see who's connected. And we do keep those records if the government lets us keep those records now, and we use them to solve crimes. I mean, I could tell you, homicide and gangs would always tell you to do field interview cards and see who's hanging out with who, because they do actually solve crimes, right, Scott? So when you're looking at, Chewy was there, who does Chewy hang out with, right? You go back and you look at those records to see who's who in the zoo. So that is realistic in the film, right?
Yeah, that was one of, like, when I got to OSS, one of the things that worked on my side, that a lot of team sergeants wanted me to become a detective, was that when I worked patrol, I always did FI cards. I got to know all the gang members that were in my area, so I know every one of them. I do FI cards, the cars they drove, whatever I could get. And I also had a Polaroid camera, so they would call me over because they couldn't get film for their Polaroid cameras, and I would take Polaroids for them. And then when I went to GET for a year and a half, was the same thing in GET. There was only a few guys working GET that would actually, you're the gang enforcement team. Your whole job is to ID them. And a lot of guys wouldn't do the FI cards. And I'm like, I just kept writing them, and I'd throw them in the box at the end of every shift. And so when it came time to promote guys from GET to OSS, it was like, well, he does what you're supposed to do.
Yep.
So, but man, you solve a lot of cases. I solved a lot of cases with those from information off FI cards, and then especially after with Cal Gangs. But now I guess Cal Gangs is basically stripped down to nothing anymore.
Yeah,
you got to boot them out after a certain amount of time, and
well, but in the scene, they do connect everybody together. Ray Harris has disappeared. Nobody's really asking where he's at because they think he just took off and somebody's sending a check. We find out that that's is Jimmy that's sending the check, which is
he took off all right.
Yeah, and the guy that the prosecutor here or the investigator here, he says, yeah, he snitched for us and he's disappeared. And they
2 months after Jimmy got out.
He said again.
2 months after Jimmy got out.
Yeah, he's dead. So they all know what's happened to him, but nobody's reporting him missing. Nobody seems to care, and it's pretty obvious. And that's the point where you realize, okay,
in
there's
the
a lot
movie,
more to Jimmy than
like Dave Boyle's wife in the movie is real vocal, but in the movie Annabeth, Jimmy's wife, she's a little more laid back in the movie, but in the book, where Jimmy gets more of his backbone is from Annabeth, because she's more gangster than Jimmy is in the book.
Yeah, she says something later on, and I'll get into it.
She's growing up with her brothers and the Savage brothers and all that. But Jimmy's actually without Annabeth was probably a really nice, a down to earth kind of guy. Not too much gangster when he was with Rita, and then he gets hooked up with Annabeth after Rita dies, and she just, I think, more or less turns him into this Jimmy gangster character that he's going to take care of the neighborhood, and he has to find justice for Katie. That's his goal for him is doing that, and so.
Well, it sounds like he essentially goes straight in the movie, but the Savage brothers are still on the periphery of all that crime and stuff going on.
I think he tries to go straight, but I don't think he does. I think as you get to the end, Annabeth turns him into the local gangster of the block.
Because if Annabeth's brother, one of the Savage brothers, Jimmy didn't rat out anybody, and one of her brothers was in on the heist.
Yeah,
and he took the rat for everybody. Because there's a point where Sean, I think, tells Whitey that, hey, he's like, who's out? Well, that's the Savage brothers. We used to be afraid of them when we were kids.
Yeah. The Savage brothers were the bad characters of the block from get-go, from childhood.
He marries into that family. They do a heist, and he doesn't rat any of them out.
No, that's why. But then he finds out that just Ray did ratted him out. But he ended up taking the fall for everybody. But Annabeth in the book has a little bigger part than she does in the movie.
Because when we're talking about how the Savage brothers are thugs, but then in several scenes, Sean Penn is giving them orders on what to do.
Exactly. Well, yeah, because Sean Penn is the ringleader of the family.
Yeah.
Because he's got more common sense than the Savage brothers, because the Savage brothers are just a mess.
Yeah, so, they're just stupid thugs.
Well, also the car they drive is all rusted out. Get a ride. I go, okay, that's consistent, right? That happens when they're using salt on the roads to keep the roads clear. Did they use salt up in? All you got rain. You didn't get a lot of snow up there in Washington State and Bremerton, right? But snow in Detroit, so everything rusted out. In fact, I had a lot of rust on my car. So, Martine, he corrected us. It was Looney's Liquor. I had to go get my hearing aids checked recently, so maybe I'll catch it. And I literally had to go get my hearing aids checked. So Looney's Liquor was the name of the liquor store that Eli Wallach was in charge of. Yeah. So Ray disappears. And it comes out that that's probably Jimmy, and so this is where the movie gets its name from, where they dispose of the bodies, Mystic River, right? He pretty much says that's where we got rid of Ray. Ray's a floater, right? And they ultimately, that's what they're going to do with Dave Boyle. And I got confess or die for this scene, right? With Dave Boyle. So ultimately, his wife tells Ray. Ray comes over and talks to him. Ultimately, she tells Ray, well, he came home with blood on his hands, and she pretty much points the finger at him, right? And I would expect, hey, you need to be quiet about that. You shouldn't be saying anything, but she does. And now Ray and he finds out that Dave had been at the bar, and he hadn't shared that earlier, so he's suspicious about that. And of course, I think it with him, same as Whitey. Okay, Dave's a damaged person, and so I can see him being good for the murder of my child. He's a damaged person. I can see him doing this too, and it comes out in the scenes where he's talking about this stuff, right? And so obviously Jimmy's wrong. Sean Penn's character's wrong. Dave, Danny, you want to talk a little bit about Dave's wife in the book and in comparison to the movie?
Dave's wife lays him out in the book and the movie. I mean, and when Sean Penn asked her, well, do you think Dave killed her? And she goes, yeah. I mean, she pretty much seals Dave's fate with Jimmy. Because Jimmy, like you said, has got the tunnel vision too. You didn't tell me this, his hand, the blood, he came home late. So Jimmy's already on track to find somebody. That's because Annabeth is pushing him in the background that, hey, you've got to find justice for Katie. You're the one, you're the king. You have to find justice for her. And so that leads up to him having the Savage brothers take him to that bar and then ultimately out to the Mystic River.
Well,
yeah,
his wife is the cousin to Annabeth.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's family too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't go to the training class about interrogations. You can't get your suspect drunk and then ask him questions and expect it to stand up in court. But they weren't really worrying about court, right? And the thing about Dave's character in this one, and I think he was suspicious. Why are these guys suddenly coming up and wanting to go to the bar with me?
Well, but you know what the worst the scene is that they pull up next to Dave.
Yeah.
And what does Dave do? He gets in the
I
car.
know. It's just
and I'm like,
Dave,
did you learn? You didn't learn the first time. Do not get in the back of the car. So he should have known then that, hey, this doesn't look right,
Yeah.
And they show him turning around again as an adult, and it's like,
that's one of the comments I made. You got in the car once and it turned out bad. Now, two guys that you haven't hung out with in years.
Exactly.
Pull up and tell you to get in the car.
And he goes through the whole movie and the book too that, I really wasn't friends with Jimmy and I really wasn't friends with Sean. I just kind of hung around. So you're definitely not friends with the Savage brothers that they're going to want to, hey, let's go get a drink down at the pub over here,
And you're like,
yeah,
okay.
that bothered me. And then the way they kind of pin him in when they get to the bar.
Oh yeah,
and they just start hammering away. No way. It's like you start pushing those drinks away. Something's up, and I think he's a smart guy. Just the way he handled when they had him in the box there and they were talking to him when they handled there was blood in your trunk. Well, maybe you should ask the guys who stole it. He can think critically. He knows what's up, and he knows what's going on in this bar too.
Oh yeah,
but he doesn't push back here, which is, maybe the social norms in the neighborhood. I don't know why, but he should have said, obviously I'm here to talk to somebody. I'm not drinking this.
That goes back to him getting kidnapped though. He didn't fight back and he never fought back through the whole movie, even in the bar scene, they put him in the corner and he knows something's up, but he never fights back. Even when Jimmy comes in, he's still kind of like, okay, doesn't get serious until they get him out by the river, where he's kind of like, hey, Jimmy, this is what happened, But by that time, You've got the senators pushing Jimmy. You got Annabeth pushing Jimmy. You got the wife who told Jimmy, yeah, he did it. So,
Well,
Yeah,
but
they
the
decided
one
he's
guy,
guilty. Go ahead, Scott.
the one guy, one of the Savage brothers, the bigger one, says, well, maybe he's telling, or says something like, maybe he's telling the truth, or maybe we should look into this thing. And the other one tells him to shut the fuck up. And it's like, so there was doubts in at least one of them that, hey, maybe he is telling the truth. Because my whole thing to the whole thing is why would Dave do this to Jimmy? He knows what Jimmy's been up to. I mean, it's a small area that they're all in. He knows what Jimmy's been to prison. He knows who Jimmy hangs out with. So, and he still even looks up to Jimmy the times that he goes over there and sees him at the house. So my whole thing is Dave doesn't fit just in the fact that there's the why. Why would Dave do that? What it doesn't add up. It doesn't. And so,
Yeah.
but Sean Penn, because Dave's wife is telling him, yeah, I think he did it. Like if you asked my wife, would have said he'd been home with me all night.
And I like how Clint Eastwood is doing this. At the same time, Jimmy thinks he's solving the crime. Sean, our detective here, is actually solving the crime, right?
Yep.
They go to ask about the gun. They ask about the gun. Brendan checks and realizes the gun's not there, so he knows who it is. And so now he challenges his brother and the friend, and he realizes they killed his girlfriend. And he beats the snot out of his brother's friend, and then is now jamming up his brother. Tell me what you did. Tell me, but it's kind of the same thing. I'm coercing the confession out of you guys now here too, right? And
Right.
the same. So Sean Penn is, tell me the truth, Dave, and I'll let you live. Which is, okay, wait a minute. So if I tell you a lie, you'll let me live because you think the truth is I killed your daughter, right?
Right.
And yeah, they both say confess or die, right? Yeah, confess or die, and you have the same kind of, you get the Brandon using force on this on his brother. Why did you do this? You killed her. Tell me what you did. And obviously, we don't get to use this coercion in the in our interview process. But I just like the way Clint dovetails both of these scenes. The crime is getting solved now, but Jimmy is. He's got the wrong suspect. Sean's got the right. Sean ends up busting in when this stuff is going on, and he takes the kids down. He's got the right suspect. You want to talk about that, Scott? Good interplay between these two these two storylines merge right at
Right.
this scene.
It's I mean, it's great. It's great the way Clint Eastwood did it. I mean, you basically have the boy saying that the boyfriend Brendan saying the same things that Sean Penn is saying, and the one boy can't talk. I guess he's not. He can hear, but he just can't talk. And they never really got. Danny, did they get into that in the book? Why the brother couldn't talk?
No, the mom always just said that, oh, I had just Ray who wouldn't shut up, and now I got Ray here who won't talk a lick. But another thing too was when Sean and Whitey look at each other and go, hey, did you listen to the 9/11 tape? And they go, no, I thought you listened to it. So they go back and listen to it, and the kid on the phone goes, hey, they want to know her name. And that's when it kicks off another, hey, how did they know it was a her when there was no one there when they called this in, supposedly? But
right.
When Brendan is choking out Ray, he's convinced that Ray can talk, and that he's been leading him on all these years. So you never really get that Ray could talk, but it kind of puts it into that he's just playing with Brendan all these years, and he actually can talk.
Right.
But yeah, they're going back and forth there, and then Jimmy, of course, they're spicing in those two interactions with Brendan and then with Dave. I thought it was really good, but because what's going to happen.
the actor that played played the friend. I forget what his name is the character name is, but he gets the snot beat out of him, and he's filled with all this pride and anger that he just got his butt killed. And you could see, I think he did a good job. He comes up, he's angry as hell, and he's now going to he's got the gun and he's going to use it on this guy, because how dare you beat me like this, like I'm the redheaded stepchild. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of emotion with this kid when he pops up, and you see it, and you can see the tension, and you can see his anger and his frustration. I don't know, Danny, what'd you think of that scene when you saw it?
I think the kid's name was Jack.
Jack, yeah, I think that was really good.
The one that gets the snot beat out of him.
Yeah,
but yeah, that was Jack, and then the brother Ray. But yeah, it goes down pretty good. The ending goes down pretty good there with the gun, and then Sean Penn, hitting it out of the way, and you can tell in the movie that he's shaken up because it's like pretty
that's
close.
What happens when you get punched in the nose a few times, right?
Yeah. You tend to get angry.
You get angry, right? Even if you are the killer, you get angry.
You get angry.
you want a piece. And the funny thing is that they just blow it off like it's no big deal after they kill Katie. There's no indication other than these little. One of them's got a hockey stick. They're walking in an interview. They're introduced in a critical scene. I mean, Clint is kind of telegraphing a little bit who they are. It's not a who done it. It's they blow it off.
They blow it off as a prank that it was.
Yeah.
We didn't mean to do it. It just it went off. But like I agree with Scott. I think that Ray planned on doing it, or at least scaring her into not going. And then.
But they I just and of course Jimmy does end up killing Dave, because Dave says, okay, whatever he says, I did it, and he stabs him. Very personal way to kill somebody. Then he ultimately shoots him, and of course he ends up in Mystic River, right? And
well, he admits that he put just Ray in the Mystic River.
Yeah,
just before he killed him.
But I wrote, poetic justice is the note I wrote. Jimmy kills Ray. Ray's son kills Jimmy's daughter. That kind of came first. Full, you know what I mean? Jimmy kills Ray. That completely turns Ray's family upside down, and ultimately,
well, Sean keeps on telling Jimmy, or not Jimmy, but Whitey, that God's taken another marker from Jimmy for everything he's done bad in his life, and Katie was just happened to be another marker.
But I thought it was right. But the connection's even tighter there, though. He kills the dad.
Yeah.
The son kills the daughter. You know what I mean? And so I just thought that was kind of poetic justice. And Dave did tell the truth. He did say, "Hey, I beat the hell out of some guy that was having sex with a kid, and I lost it." But they ignore that story. That's just another lie that Dave is telling. And let's show the scene. Dave Boyle, and this is when they finish off Dave. And he's got to know what's happening. He knows what's coming. He's not talking these guys down. Martine, you want to show that scene? There we go. And he actually starts coming clean. There's great clarity. But what I liked about this is after Dave's been murdered.
Yeah, Sean's already killed Dave.
Sean's drunk, right? And but Dave has clarity before he dies.
Because he killed Dave, and he shouldn't have. He finds out.
Well, he doesn't know that yet. He knows that only he killed his daughter's dad. He thinks he got justice. He killed Dave, and he gets drunk. But now he learns, hey, I got your killer, and he explains who it is, and what he made a comment. You're just a little late. Jimmy, you're just a little late. Sean, thank you for finding the killer, but you're just a little late, right? Because he ends up killing Dave. And what I liked about this scene is they end up both stand. So these are the two kids who were standing in the middle of the road watching the car drive away when Dave was kidnapped. And they say something in the scene. Well, the Dave we know died 25 years ago, right? It's not the same Dave. I'm sure that was emphasized in the book as well. But
Yeah.
and
So,
there,
but here's where he tells him he knows that he killed uh,
Ray.
Ray when he says, "You're going to send Celeste $500 a month too."
Yeah. Yeah. And he says it to him, right? Yep. And they're both looking, and you end up seeing that they're looking down the street, just like when Dave was kidnapped. Now Dave's gone; he's permanently gone this time, and he talks about he was just an 11-year-old kid locked in the cellar. And so I liked the imagery that Clint puts together, and I like this whole scene. I do like the old rough Boston neighborhood too. It reminds me of the kind of we didn't grow up with high rise and stuff, but just these old Midwest neighborhoods, a little worn down by weather there. So what'd you think of the scene, Danny?
In this scene right here, after Sean Penn gets told that, hey, da-da-da-da-da, and Sean Penn realizes that, damn, I killed Dave, the wrong guy. At this point, Sean Penn, you get the feeling that he's feeling a little bad about it, He's not going to tell Sean that, yeah, I did it, but he's feeling a little remorse until the next scene with Annabeth.
I know, and I got that scene coming up, and here's the backstory with Sean, which they never get into. I guess we got a couple minutes, Danny. So this whole backstory with Sean and his wife, she leaves him because she's pregnant, doesn't want to have the baby, or I don't get it here.
She leaves Sean because of his work. She's a rural aristocrat, like theater. She's a actress in plays, more of the artsy type.
Right.
Beautiful, and she just can't take Sean's mood, which they reflected back to his growing up and the whole Dave thing. That he's just tied into his job. He's the patrol guy. He just got off suspension for doing something else. He's working with Whitey now. She had left him like 6 months earlier. She was pregnant, took off to New York, having an affair. Having an affair, but she would call him. Does in the movie be silent, but in the book, it explains that he's feeling bad because he knows why she left. It was because of him and his past things and him just being committed to the job, and they couldn't really they didn't have anything at that time that linked them together, so she left.
Yeah, they don't really fully develop that side of the story because you don't really get a lot of that backstory out of there. And,
you get more out of the book.
Now that I'm hearing it, I'm like, well, why did you want her to come back if she's cheating on you? Let her go. let her go. Why? You're paying the bills and she's blaming you for going to work. I mean, let her go. I mean,
he felt guilty though because of his job, that he didn't give enough time to her, and then because he doesn't know the name of the baby until the end of the movie.
Oh, really?
He finally asks. Well, at the end of the movie, she tells him, your daughter's name is Nora. Because she's already had the baby in New York, and eventually she comes back. But they're just two separate people from two different worlds, and he met her in college.
She needs somebody to pay the bill. That's he's got a job.
Yeah,
I'm being very cynical here, I guess, on that one, but they never really fully developed, so I was kind of confusing. They either should have developed that one more, I think, or not. And you're right. He does say
there's more development with Bobby O'Donnell and the other character Roth that comes into the bar and tells Katie, "Hey, you're drunk. You might want to leave." So those two characters are built up more in the book. And like I said, the task force is built up more in the book. Yeah. But, as far as those, there's a few things. As far as that, the book pretty much follows the script.
All right. Well, let's get into the final scene. And, you're going to like how I titled the one, Their Daddy's a King. And then I write betrayal. So he acknowledges to Annabelle that he killed Dave, and she doesn't bat an eyelash. No. That's okay. That's what kings do, I guess. and you're protecting your daughter. You know, these things are okay. So this gets to what you're talking about, Danny. That this is where you really first see her, and you're thinking, wow, she's kind of a despicable person.
Yeah.
And
in the book, she's like that through the whole book.
oh, is she? Yeah.
She's always building up, because Jimmy does have a little remorse for things that, you know, how he was away from Katie, how he's away from Rita, and then Rita died while he's in prison, and, you know, and he had a funeral in shackles, and so he's got a little bit of remorse in him. But this chick, like, as soon as she sees it, bam, man, she's in there. Oh no, Jimmy, you had to do this. You know, you're the king.
You're the king. And he's got the jailhouse tattoo on his back. That's what the opening scene, you know, or the opening of this particular scene. I think the other thing, here's the difference between Annabelle and Celeste. You know, I think Dave might have been involved, and she's automatically jumping to conclusions he's involved. He says, yeah, I killed him. And she's like, oh, that's okay, honey.
Yeah,
you're the king. Completely different, you know.
You were just looking for justice for Katie, and oh well, you know, you
got it wrong.
You got the wrong guy, but that's okay, because you, in your heart, you were really doing the right thing for Katie.
Yeah, it's kind of like our governor is spending. Oh, hey, you haven't fixed anything, but you know, you spent billions of dollars doing it, so it's okay. So, but that's, you know, so it's despicable. But then it also goes into, and the last scene is pretty much Sean is at a parade, Jimmy's at the parade, and Dave's son is on the flatbed at this parade, right? And they see him go by. But you know, what I thought was really was Celeste finally realizes. I think she finally realizes, one, Dave's gone. It's her fault, because she told Ray that she thinks Dave was involved. Now we know Dave wasn't. I mean, Jimmy, that Dave was involved, and now she know, and she's realizing, what did I do? Right? What did I do? And of course, the leaders in the neighborhood are Jimmy and Annabelle, the ones who did it. And so she's got a long road of raising a son all by herself, because she didn't trust her husband. That's what I got out of the last scene. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because you see her walking down the street and the kid's on the float, and he's just like out of it. I mean, he's going to be a mess without Dave. And then she looks across the street, sees Annabeth and Jimmy and the Savage brothers all happy. And then she looks even further, sees Sean with his wife and the baby. So she's like, you know, I really fucked up, you know. She feels bad, actually.
Yeah, I think Martine's talking about all the wives in this movie. So we got Annabelle, who's, it's okay to murder somebody because you're the king. You know, it's good to be the king.
It's good to be king.
It's good to be the king. And then Celeste, she you know, sells her husband out, right? Sells the husband out, right? And then Sean's, since we got the backstory from the book, Sean's wife leaves him because she doesn't like his job, and she's an actress, and they just don't mesh, and she goes away and has affairs and comes back with a baby and take me back. I mean, Jesus. That would be a story in itself, just talking about all the three women. But I do think, you know, for me, I didn't like Celeste's character here because I think she betrays her husband, and now suddenly the light of day is shining on her and what her reality is, and there's not a damn thing she can do about it.
Yeah, Celeste is the main culprit in this whole thing, because when Jimmy asks her, "Do you think Dave killed Katie?" and she just says, "Yeah," that sets it all off for Jimmy. You know, he doesn't need to hear anything more. Had she said, "Well, no, I don't think he did it," I think no, she just pretty much puts it on.
Yep.
Puts it on Dave.
Yep. So that, yeah. So I and you know what? And the only, well, I feel bad for Dave, but I also feel sorry for his son, because you can see his son is head down, dad's not there, and he wasn't just a dad. He was, I don't want to say he was his friend, but he was a good dad, right, Scott?
Yeah. He's the guy that walked him to school every day. I
Walked him to
he
school.
played baseball and catch with them all the time. I mean, he was a good dad. And then, but at the very last scene is the one, it's one of those type of movies where you go, wait, don't stop now. Let's play it out a little farther. Because like when Sean makes the pistol gesture and shoots at Sean Penn, and Sean Penn puts his arms like, okay, you got me.
Well, Sean Penn, after he has a talk, Annabeth gives him the talk, he comes out like he's the gangster of the block.
Right.
Yep.
And then Sean Penn sees him and gives him the gun motion, and it's like, hey, I'm coming for you next.
Right.
Yeah,
And it's like,
it's just a matter of time.
Like, wait a minute, don't end yet. Let's see you go after Jimmy.
Yeah.
We both know you're right, and come and get me, catch me if you can, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Hey guys, thank you for joining me here on the great movie.
Yeah.
A lot of good actors. Maybe we don't like their politics, but we like their craft. And this was a good movie. I'd recommend it to folks. I'll have to, once I get through some of the reading I'm doing for my other show, maybe I'll pick up Mystic River and get through it, because it sounds like an interesting book as well. So thank you, Danny, for joining me yet again. Stick around for debrief. Scott, thank you for joining me. Martine, we are finished with Mystic River. You can take it away.